when I was 27. And when I sold my shares in that first business, I was helping a friend build his software business. And when we started working together, he had 10 clients. I got him to about 100 clients. I was just working a couple days a week. And finally I said to him, look, I got to go. I got to go back. I got to get a real job, a real paycheck. And he said, no, you have to start another business. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, you have to teach people what you know about selling on the phone.
Welcome to the Sales Problem Podcast. Here is the problem we are trying to solve. Every year you hit the reset button and you have to beat your numbers and grow your business. You have to get quicker, faster, and better. We are two guys trying to solve that sales problem, trying to help you grow by enhancing what you know about the art and science of selling and personal development. Along the way, we're going to interview some interesting characters and debate some different angles about this common business problem. So thanks for joining us. Let's get growing. Welcome back, listeners, to the Sales Problem Podcast. It's season 2, and this is episode 4. I'm your host, Daniel Burns, and joining me is my always reachable, resourceful, and relatable co-host, Steve Comerford. Steve, how you doing, and what's in your cup today?
I thought you were going to add rock star to the end of that, Dan. That would have been a nice fourth
I could.
You could. Hey, nice to be with you again, Dan. And I am have my favorite cup of coffee here. I changed it up a little bit. I went with the 49th parallel, but get this, I'm already full of caffeine for the day, so I went the decaf route.
Ooh,
so get up with
good call.
So later in the day, thought I'd have a little decaf, but it's a sugarcane, cashew, and nutmeg. Do you like that?
Ooh,
it's pretty sharp. It's pretty tasty, and keeps me moving through the day.
Nice.
Beans out of 5 beans. I give it like a 4.3.
4.3.
Who knows what this rating system's all about anyway? How about you? What little cup of joe do you got going on today?
Yeah, I kept it local again today, Steve. So I went with Just Us Coffee. And this one is called Jungle. So I love a dark roast, but this has dark fruit and toffee. So it's got a really nice taste, and it's from Wolfville, Nova Scotia.
I love Wolfville.
So small batch coffee. So I'll put the link in the show notes, and I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. I like a dark brew, and I'm really getting that the dark fruits coming through. So it's really nice.
I have a sense you picked that too. We've got you got a fellow East Coaster on the podcast today, so you're really keeping it close to home.
That's right, Steve. Let's get after this because I'm excited about our guest today. Hold the phone, listeners. Today we have the phone lady, Mary Jane Copps. And I can't tell you how excited I am to have her on for this episode because I believe this is a missing piece of the puzzle that so many salespeople have trouble leveraging. We know in sales when we pick up our phone, we can book meetings. When we answer it, sometimes we get hot leads. And when we outbound cold call using the phone, wait a second, does everybody outbound cold call by phone? I hope so. Because it's called Dialing for Dollars, and it is a tool that's going to generate cash into your business if you do it. But I've seen so many salespeople just drive around all day long wanting to see people face to face. I can hear them now saying, but Dan, I'm so much better when I sell face to face. Well, we're going to solve all that today, and we have the expert with us who's going to help. So let me tell you a little bit about Mary Jane Copps. She has worked with over 700 clients. She has trained, get this, over 15,000 individuals. She's the author of The Phone Book, and she's been featured on Fox News, Bloomberg, The Wall Street Journal, BBC, CBC, and now, of course, the very best, the Sales Problem Podcast, the self-proclaimed #1 podcast for all salespeople. Steve, our guests are getting better and better and better. Mary Jane Copps, welcome to the Sales Problem Podcast. Tell our listeners how you're feeling and how did you become the phone lady?
Feeling great. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Steve, for having me here. Look at all the publicity I had to get to finally attract your attention. This is fantastic.
We love having you here.
It was an accident. I like to say that I did this on a dare. So I've been an entrepreneur since 1987. When I was 27. And when I sold my shares in that first business, I was helping a friend build his software business. And when we started working together, he had 10 clients. I got him to about 100 clients. I was just working a couple days a week. And finally I said to him, look, I got to go. I got to go back. I got to get a real job, a real paycheck. And he said, no, you have to start another business. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, you have to teach people what you know about selling on the phone. And I said, I don't think that's a business. I think that's just common sense. And he said, no, it's a business. He said, stay here with me, keep the office you have. We'll just give it a try. We'll run it through my company. Like, don't worry about a website or anything. Just give it a try. So I printed off 10 brochures on a dot matrix printer.
Oh.
Put them in the mail and had 3 jobs right away. And that'll be 18 years ago, January.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So everything grew from there. So there's obviously a huge demand you're finding for phone training.
It's amazing to me. I mean, there's been several points where I thought, maybe I'm obsolete, right? So when email started to become super popular, and then when texting started to come in as well, I thought, maybe that phone is going to be obsolete. And then during COVID, we all moved to a Zoom or a Teams, and I thought, maybe that phone. But right now, I am busier than ever before, which is amazing.
That is amazing. I'm just curious how you did, work 2 days and you grew from 10 to 100 accounts. That was some pretty impressive. But to start off the podcast, Mary Jane, just like to offer up like a drop the mic advice, like a top tip that you would share, considering your success over the last number of years. If somebody that is listening today and you want to share something that is just a gold nugget that would get them started in the right direction when it comes to phone sales and using the phone more effectively, what would you have there?
Such a tough question. I've gone back and forth about this because I would like it to be the best one, but I really have trouble deciding. I think in the marketplace that we're in, what I want to say is that the most important thing we can do is inspire a conversation with our prospects. I was recently doing a training series with a group of advisors. And in the end, what I said to them is, you don't book the meeting. The prospect books the meeting. If you don't reveal to them why they need to book the meeting, they're not going to book it. Like, it has to be, when we're talking to our prospects, we have to inspire a conversation that helps them understand their reason for saying yes to meet with me or you. or Stevie, right, Dan? Like, they're the ones that go, yeah, this is a fit. So we have to really work on our conversation skills when we're in sales so that we can make those great conversations happen.
Oh, I love that. Because I've always been used to, coming into a conversation with understanding what's in it for me, meaning the prospect. You need to answer that question, but you turn it a little bit differently in terms of inspiring them or having a better conversation. Is that what I'm getting from you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can know why you should work with the phone lady.
Yes.
But they have to understand why. And what works is if they say it out loud. So if somebody says to me, my team are really struggling with, they're just not making the calls we need them to make, it's not happening. Once they say that, then I've made a sale. But if they never say it out loud, that means they're not necessarily recognizing the value of working with me. If they say it out loud, they can't take it back.
Well, I really like what you said, and I agree about inspiring conversation. And when it comes to email and text, it's not necessarily a conversation. You're not speaking any words. Those words can be taken so many different ways. There's no tone. All those things are missing. But I think we kind of alluded to it earlier. There are so many new ways of communicating. Text and email, just to name a couple, but you've got social media. You could send people, a DM. You've got Loom for, video messaging. We've got Zoom calls. So I'm curious, have you looked at ever incorporating those as part of your business, or you've stayed true to the phone because it's the best in terms of creating sales results? Help our listeners understand what it is about the phone versus some of those other technologies that might get them a little further ahead.
Sure. Well, I think Zoom and the phone are almost the same for me now. But about 5 to 8 years ago, I'm not sure when, I started using several mediums to reach people. So the actual cold call where I only leave you a voicemail, very difficult to get a hold of someone if you're only doing that one thing, because we actually don't know anymore who's actually checking voicemail. Used to be we all did, but not necessarily anymore, right? And we don't even know anymore who's checking email regularly. One of the things that the pandemic did was those people who are working in a hybrid environment, whether they're at the office or at home, they have their inter-office chat open all day long. And they're checking that way more than they're checking their email. So to reach somebody and book a conversation, I will leave you a voicemail because the sound of my voice builds trust. Words on a screen don't go towards building trust, but the sound of your voice, your enthusiasm, your interest, your professionalism, that can all come across in a voicemail. In the voicemail, you say, and I'm also going to send you an email in case that's easier for you. And in that email, you include a link to your calendar so they can book the conversation at a time that works best for them, right? And then for me, because my work is all business to business, I'll connect with them on LinkedIn as well. If we have contacts in common, that's also going to build trust and credibility right away.
I really like that idea of building trust, and you're right. There is something that comes through in your voice and in your tone and creating warmth that you can't do in a text or an email. But I also love that you're combining, different mediums to really maximize the touch points and show up on the radar where people are checking.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely not a scammer if you're doing that in a professional way, right? Yeah. You're saying, I know what I'm doing has value, so I'm going to keep this up and make sure I get your attention.
Do you also, in that message to your potential, your prospect, how do you like name dropping? I know you said, you know a couple of people, but do you name drop as well, like clients that you've worked with? Is that a good tactic?
I don't usually do that in a voicemail. So the function of voicemail today, if you're calling someone you've never spoken to before, is to work with the power of human curiosity. So I'm not going to phone you, Steve, and say, hi, it's Mary Jane Cops calling from the phone lady. I understand you have a team of people there that are making outbound calls. Like I don't say any of that. I simply say, hi, Steve, it's Mary Jane Cops calling from the phone lady, and I have a quick question for you. I'm available till 3 p.m. today. This is the number you can reach me at. If we don't connect by 3 p.m., that's fine. I'm going to follow up with you again on Friday. And in the meantime, in case it's easier for you, I'm going to send you an email. So look for me in your inbox.
I love that. I like the aspect of having thanks. You might not get back to me, but I'll call you back on Friday. So you've already dropped that seed that you expect my call. I love that piece.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of phone calling and prospecting in the past. So just a short story. I don't know. I'll weave this in here, Dan, but I was leaving a voicemail. I like the 1-2 punch, right? To your point, the voicemail plus the email, and tying in some relevant information. But for the darndest reason, I could not nail my voicemail. I just kept stumbling through it. It took me 10 attempts. And I was like, all right, that's enough. And I hung up the phone. It was like, whew, I was exhausted after that. I don't know if I got anywhere with the prospect, but I just love that story. 10 attempts. But I'll shift gears for a second and talk about your book. Dan had mentioned the phone book, and congratulations on that.
Thank
Question
you.
is, do you have a favorite story from the book that you want to tell our listeners about?
Again, another tough question.
That's what we do here.
I looked at it and I thought, well, what am I going to choose? So I've chosen chapter 9, which is all about persistence and following up. Most of the salespeople, the small business owners, the entrepreneurs I spend time with, that's where they fall down, is confusing persistence with pestering. And they're not the same thing. Both those words come to us from 15th century French. So they come from the same source, but a pest is like COVID. It's pestilence. It's something you just can't get rid of, like bugs on your plants. But persistence is loyalty. It's discipline. It's responsibility. And I like to say to people, think about the people in your own life that you're counting on to be persistent. So I want my car mechanic to be persistent because I know nothing about cars. I want my plumber to be persistent. I want my doctor to be persistent. All these people, we're counting on them. So if we display persistence, we're showing that we believe in what we're doing and that we're professionals. We're not fly-by-nighters.
Nice. Maybe I was persistent with my phone calls, but I would say though that it has to get back to the value piece. There needs to be something back for that client to say, yes, I need to book that meeting with you. Right. That's the difference.
Well, I think, if I'm prospecting, I'm working on that, strictly on that curiosity piece. I mean, obviously they can go to my website at any time, but what happens for most of my clients is they'll see a 25 to 35% increase in returned calls. And this is valuable because when someone calls us back, they're choosing the time, so they are less defensive right away.
Yeah.
And they know they have time for a conversation. So that notion of saying, Daniel, I have a quick question for you. For some people, they're like, well, who's Mary Jane and what's that quick question? Gosh, it's driving me crazy. I have to phone her back. I have to find out what the quick question is. And you need a quick question. As I say to people, I'm not making this up. You need to have a quick question. So, it's all part of...
Be prepared for the callback.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I love that you pointed out the persistence versus pestering. And I was always taught that being pleasantly persistent is an important part of sales. When you genuinely have their best interest, you really have something that you think fits, then it just shows it's worth following up. It's worth, calling back because it's something that's going to benefit them.
That's right. And I think that, one of the things I learned in my very early days is there's very few absolute no's if you're calling your target market. There's a lot of not right nows.
Yep.
Or we've gotten distracted with another project. And if you just disappear, we just leave money on the table when we do that, always.
Yeah. So Mary Jane, I'm dying to ask you this because I have managed sales teams where I believe the phone is the way to get people's attention, whether it's to help book an event or, to sell product. But when asking the sales team to dedicate some time to picking up the phone and calling, you see fear in people's eyes right away. And there's this resistance like, don't make me do that. Don't make me do that, even though after they've gotten into it, they've got over that initial hump, they're starting to make sales, they're reaching people, the momentum starts, it's a great thing, but every time there's this fear, there's a resistance. Can you comment on that? Something you see a lot?
Well, I actually think that's why I'm so busy, is that fear, that anxiety is growing substantially. Because there are a lot of individuals now starting their careers, but they never lived in a house with a house phone. Mm-hmm. They've always owned a cell phone. So they've always been able to text. And they don't have some of the basic skills that, I learned as a very young person. So also, I've worked with lots of salespeople on small teams, and they despise being the only one in the office that's talking on the phone. Like their vision is everybody's listening to every word I say.
True.
There's so many reasons people are afraid. They're afraid of that initial defensiveness. If they're prospecting, you will always hear that. If somebody answers a call they're not expecting.
Yeah.
One of the biggest fears is, what if they ask me something I don't know? Mm-hmm. How do I end a call? I get that question a lot. Okay. How do I make the calls effective and efficient? Okay. I need to prepare. So the thing about any text communication, email, text, any of those things, is that we get to edit it. Right now, We're more or less riffing, right? We're just feeding off each other. So this is very much improvisational, and that's terrifying if you haven't practiced it.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, I like to say that talking on the phone is a lot like public speaking, and you know what Seinfeld says about public speaking, that people would rather be dead than give a speech. So I think for some people, the phone is that scary.
I've seen it. And if I can add, Dan, I've seen it work really well when you have a buddy. And I don't know if you've taught that or have used that with different organizations, is if, again, not in a large group, but you had two people sectioned off in their own office and they practice on each other and then dial and do it live, and good feedback back and forth. I found that successful.
Absolutely. And I do some training of sales leaders and sales managers. And that's one of the things I say. Like, if you've got someone on your team that's new to making outbound calls, or is, you've got call reluctance going on, any of those things, pair people up and let them help each other out and motivate each other. It's a great thing to do.
When I said earlier, dialing for dollars, what I pictured was a volume of calls, which, in my sales career, I've sat down and just picked up the phone and dialed many, many numbers. And it was a volume game that you make X amount of calls and you're going to, create X amount of leads. What's the best way to be effective, given that somebody can answer their phone, easily hang up? I think sometimes when people think of selling by phone, they think of that call you get in the middle of dinner where it's a telemarketer and you go, oh my God, first instinct is to hang up. I don't know who stays on the phone for those calls or how they're effective, but how do you differentiate from that approach to a more professional approach that gets results?
Well, the majority of my clients, I would say 98% of my clients, are business to business. So that's a different venue than calling somebody at dinner time, for sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that's important to know is that actually streaming has had a big impact on phone communication.
Oh.
So the fact that all of us here and everyone listening, we have complete control of our time, or at least we feel we do, because streaming allows us to watch any program, any television, any movie, listen to any piece of music on our schedule. We don't have to be somewhere at 8:00 when, West Wing starts or whatever. So what that has given us is this illusion that we are fully in charge of our time. And that means that we are not picking up the phone, or very few people pick up the phone. If it's a number they don't recognize, they're just not going to pick it up.
Yeah.
So that's why you have to do that multi-layer approach. And it does mean, Daniel, that, I, like you, I started selling in 1987, so I've done lots of dialing for dollars. But today, because I have to do that multi-layer approach, and some of my clients do voicemail, email, and text, you're making a lot less calls per hour, but you're reaching people. So it's not a volume game anymore. It's a quality game, very much a quality game.
Okay. I'm super curious too about, scripts.
Okay.
People who call and they follow a call script, and I've certainly answered quite a few of those and thought, does this really work? I mean, it seems so canned. There's no questions. They seem to just steamroll into your life, and there's this, very obvious sales script. And I'm wondering, did those things actually convert to sales, or, where you said before, inspiring conversations are really kind of what break through via the phone? Is there any scripting that you've seen work?
Well, when I'm training someone new, scripting is a big part of what we do. Because you are about to do something you've never done before. Or if I'm working with a company and they're about to introduce a new product, we do have to do some scripting.
Okay.
But usually your first round of calls, you're going to have to revise that script many, many times, because what we put on paper and what happens here are very different things. And that, again, that's hard on people. But one of the things I do here in my office is I answer every call. So I've had some scripted sales calls recently, and they're very good. They can be very good.
Yeah.
But they're not connected to me. So I'm not sure who the consumer is that is interested in a product that there's no way that script connects with me. It's a great script and they're delivering it with enthusiasm. They got it down. But I know they don't care about me at all. So why would I proceed? Right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious too. So you talk about business to business selling, and those are the people that you work with. Yep. Monday to Friday, is there a part of the day, morning, afternoon? Is it Tuesday or Thursday? Is there a particular good time to the week?
No.
Okay.
And the reason is that we just don't know how people are working anymore. And we haven't for a while, really, but especially since COVID, right? We just don't know. People are, and good for us, we're adapting our days to what's best in our world in many cases. So just pick up the phone, keep calling. I mean, early in my career, in building that first business, I remember making a sale on Christmas Eve. So I really don't pay attention to like the long weekends or anything like that. If you've got a great message, just make sure you get in touch with people.
I always used to love Friday afternoons before a long weekend because you knew the people were in the office just kind of wrapping things up. So you knew you'd, in all likelihood, get a hold of that person. Higher success rate.
The week before Christmas is a great time to make calls because people aren't traveling anymore and they're not in meetings. They're actually in their office trying to recover from the year.
So I have a question here, and Dan had written this question to ask you about, leaving a great voicemail. But it sounds like you have that. I love I have a quick question for you. So I'm gonna flip Dan's question upside down because Dan always likes failure stories or complete disasters. I'd love train wrecks. So I'd love to get a not so great story and of a time in your phone your phone experience and what you learned from it, where it what happened.
Okay.
Sorry to throw this left curve at you.
No, it's good. It's good. See, we're riffing. This is conversation. This is good. Well, I think the story that I'll share is when I started that first business, my background was journalism. So I'd been a real estate journalist for the Globe and Mail and several magazines in Canada and the US. And so I understood how to create a conversation on the phone, but I'd never sold anything. So I start this North American marketing company out of my living room with a business partner. I'm in my late 20s, and we're never more confident than in our late 20s.
Yeah, you know everything. Yeah.
I knew everything. So I actually put a mortgage on my house to start that business. And then it turned out that selling wasn't at all what I thought it was. So I was calling CEOs and senior VPs across the country into the US. I was having great conversations, but I was not selling anything, like nothing. And my husband was in the background sort of going, "What are you doing?" And I didn't know what I was doing. So I started recording my calls. And just for a laugh, I'll remind people that in those days to do that, I had to get a little device that allowed me to attach a cassette recorder to my phone. Anyway, so I started recording my calls. And the first call I listened to, I realized my error. I was nervous calling these people with these big titles. And I was really visualizing I was interrupting them. So I would start every call with, "Hi, Dan. It's Mary Jane Copson. I'm just calling to..." And in listening to the recording, I could hear they didn't hear nervous and polite. They heard, "I'm just calling. I got nothing better to do. I'm just sitting here dialing numbers." Or I'm just calling. There's no real value to this conversation. It's just a call. And it took me a long time to get that word out of my vocabulary altogether. I call that a vocal tick, and we all have vocal ticks. But any call I didn't use it, I made a sale. And that's why I'm the phone lady in reality, because since that moment, which was probably 1988, I've been studying phone communication, and clients still hire me to listen to their team's phone calls. And that's what I'm listening for. Where are these places that we don't sound confident? Where are these places that we're not presenting our product or service in its best light because we're using what I call iffy language?
I am so glad I asked that question. I really am, because one, you brought up the case of having wonderful conversations but never getting to the point. That just kills me sometimes when I'm in a meeting, or I'm guilty of it too, right? You're just having a nice conversation, but okay, so why are we here again? I just checking in. But then, I think with the to your point around the voicemail and being very, is a matter of, here's the reason I'm calling, or this is the purpose for my call? Is that just getting straight to the point?
Yes. Some research that popped up in front of me quite a few years ago is this idea of decision fatigue, where because of technology, we're all making about 35,000 decisions a day each. And while I didn't believe it, I ended up proving it to myself by trying to count my decisions one day. But the idea is, when we're calling people, we have to make it really straightforward. We have to tell people exactly why we're calling. We have to respect their time right from the beginning, or they're not going to listen to us, right? If you waste my time, I'm moving on. I've got a lot to do. But also this idea of helping people make decisions, whether that decision is, it doesn't sound like I'm a good fit for training your team on this, or if the decision is, the next best decision is for me to prepare a proposal for you. Right? We all need help making decisions these days. Yeah.
You want to jump in, Steve?
Yeah. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I want to stay on this because I think for our listeners, this is a really key point.
Mm-hmm.
I love vocal tics because I hear them all the time. And as you were talking, a few came into my head. I love that you said I'm just calling. I also hear sometimes, sorry to bother you, but, or, I'll be quick.
Yeah.
I just need a minute. So language is so powerful, and if you don't set it up properly, then how can you expect somebody to respond differently than the initial prompt that you gave them? I mean, you can almost predict that if you're starting that way, the first thing they're going to think is, okay, this isn't important.
Well, that's right. And so how I explain this is, especially if you're calling someone you've never spoken to before, as soon as they answer, they've got two questions that pop up in their mind, and they kind of flash there like neon signs in Vegas. And until you answer them, they're not going to hear anything else you say. And the first one is, what is this about? Mm-hmm. So, Steve, the language you gave, if I'm going to call you, I'm going to say, hi, Steve, it's Mary Jane Copps calling from the phone lady. And the reason for my call today is, I'm not going to ask you how you are. I'm not going to ask you, is this a good time? But then when I give you the reason, I have to make it about you. I can't say, I'm calling because my company, the phone lady, is really great at training sales teams, and I understand you have one. No. Because that's about me. I need it to be about you. So I need to indicate I've done my research. I know what your company does. And then say, and I believe there's value. And then I ask my quick question, which if I'm doing this on behalf of the phone lady, my question is, how do you make decisions about the trainers that work with your team? Because at this point, I can't sell you. I'm never going to sell you in one call. Who sells something in one call anymore?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Gives them, well, you just made me pause and think. So I guess that kind of makes the person think and have to respond, right? It's not something that they can come back with. Love it.
Yeah, and it's open-ended.
Yeah.
Right?
The one other question I have for you, we didn't write this out, but is the typical gatekeeper, right? So you're calling the CFO or the COO or the CEO, if you want to go to that level, and you reach the executive assistant. How do you what's your, I don't know, best tip for getting past that gatekeeper?
Don't try to get past them. That's my tip. Get them to help you. Get them to help you. So again, this comes from my journalism background. And, when you're on deadline, you're trying to get an interview with somebody, those individuals that are executive assistants can be really helpful in making that happen. And it's the same when you're trying to reach a CEO, a CFO. They're busy, and who runs their calendar anyway?
Good point.
It's their executive assistant, right? So you do have to, I might say, executive assistant, it's Mary Jane Koppes calling. I have a quick question for the CEO. And my guess is that a 10-minute conversation is what's needed. But what do you suggest? And then I do exactly what they tell me. And I say to them, and should I copy you on my email? I should. Okay, great. Because they're in charge of the calendar.
Gold, Dan, gold. I love it. I always, in my history, always wanted to make sure that I gave the respect or gave the appreciation to the people at the front desk, because you never know where they are in the decision-making process, because they could influence how things could turn for you. And they actually might sign for something. And I've learned that lesson the hard way. Yeah.
Well, then, can I add something there?
Oh, okay.
One of the other things you can do, let's say you're calling and you're not entirely sure who your contact should be, who you should really have this conversation with.
Good point.
Instead of asking the person at the front desk, who may or may not know everyone in a large company, go for the executive assistant of the CEO. So the person at the front desk views the executive assistant of the CEO as an equal. So normally they will put you through without asking that question, well, can I tell her who's calling or whatever, right? And then when you reach them, you simply say, I'm wondering if you can help me. Now, most people love to help, so that's a magic word. I'm wondering if you can help me. I'm looking to find out who your senior sales manager is for your outbound calling team. Who should I contact there? Oh, well, contact so-and-so. And then when I contact so-and-so, I say, I've been directed to you by the CEO's office. They call me right back.
Magic.
This,
Daniel, this has been a very good podcast. I love this interview and the questions. Mary Jane, you've been fantastic. I can't say enough, but for the people that are listening, are there ways that they can learn more about you, either your book or ways to reach you, things that they can learn?
Sure. I mean, the website's easy to find, right? thephonelady.com. Very straightforward.
Pretty simple.
There's lots of free resources there. Yeah. And it's easy to book a half-hour discovery call with me. The book is the phone book and easy to get on Amazon.ca or Amazon.com.
We will put all those links into the show notes. And Mary Jane, we've just been picking your brain, and I can't help but just ask one more question because you're giving so much great information. And I'm curious on this one. It came up for me: is if you had to build a business and grow sales, would you do it with an outside sales team or would you do it with an inside sales team? Is there one that's you'd put all your money on?
I do it with an inside sales team. I think that in today's world, it's very difficult for people to book face-to-face meetings in their office. Not sure about you guys, but the prospect of somebody coming and maybe it becoming a whole hour of my day, whereas we could meet on Zoom. Like, obviously, there are things we have to sell where we need to go and see a plant or we need to go and do a physical audit. But that initial building of trust and relationship, that's an inside sales team. Yeah.
That's a great insight because you can really reach so much quicker and such a broad range of people via phone and Zoom. And I've seen inside sales be just as successful, if not more successful than outside sales. Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. Get it started that way for sure.
Well, Mary Jane, thank you so much for coming on the Sales Problem Podcast. You certainly communicated brilliantly on the topic of phone sales for us, and you have helped our listeners solve the sales problem. You have given our listeners some knowledge that they need to thrive and succeed. You have helped them grow by enhancing what they know. So listeners, thanks for hanging in and listening to another conversation with us. We love you. We appreciate you. And if you know somebody who hesitates to pick up the phone, please send them this episode. Share with everybody within your network. We'll see you next episode. Until then, keep building the best version of you.